All right, everybody. Welcome to day 2 of Sickle. So today we're going to be doing proper software you can love talks. For me, being in this space has been really interesting because instead of just like becoming a better programmer, what I've actually found is like I have much more control and foresight into like decisions I can make about software and kind of figure out like dissect like what the decisions are, what am I really trying to do, where am I trying to go, and kind of like guide the software into like a good place, rather than like I have endless projects where I got really like, you know, I wanted to do a certain type of hash map lookup, and I wanted to make sure everything was alphabetically organized for a specific use case, and then the project kind of spun off and didn't really go anywhere, and then it was like, well, no one's gonna use this. I put a ton of work into it, and it's more of like, it was a fun like brain puzzle, but it wasn't really useful to people. And I figured that was like, okay, that's pretty fun. And then there was a point where I made a small project in Zig, and it was useful to people, and it was like a next level of enjoyment for my craft per se, if you want to call it that. So when I started going to events like this, where you're getting to meet other engineers who care about this sort of practice and care about like they're like people who still like computers. You could put it that way. It was like really exciting to see other people who were like this. I think first it started at Handmade Seattle, and I was like, oh shit, like this is like French, chef's kiss. And then I got involved with Zig, and for me, like I think I told a little bit of the story about like Andrew. He made this music player. I knew of his like blog. He's making some weird programming language. It's COVID. I got time, and so I get into it. I'm like, okay, pretty nice decisions right here. But then Laura started Zig Showtime. And so Zig Showtime was a Twitch stream he'd run. He'd usually have about 2 like technical presenters, but like the cool part was like, it wasn't just like, it's different from like a static recording on YouTube. Like it was an event. Everyone would go on, you'd have chat like fucking blowing up. It was just like every, I don't know, month, or was it every like 2 weeks or something like that? It was like, it really like broke up the dullness of COVID as well. It's since slowed down because we're able to have events like this, which is even better. But from there, that's kind of like where I came from, was like, oh, like these community events, getting to interact with people is something I truly enjoy, and it's really nice. We have our Sickle Day, and we have the man himself, Loris, who coined the term "software you can love." I highly suggest reading his little blog post on that. So I've had a lot of like fun times with Loris. He taught me to love and how to play Secret Hitler, which is a board game. He's just a marketing mastermind, and yeah, put it up for Loris.
Thank you very much, Matt. So, hello everybody. When I first came up with software you can love, as in like the term, I felt like, I figured this thing out. It's so obvious that software you can love. What else do you need to say? Well, then I told this idea to other people, and it kind of resonated. But that's not enough. You have to think this through. People had genuine questions that I didn't have a good answer to. So I spent some time thinking about this stuff a little bit more. So before I jump into the main point of the talk, I want to give you a status update on what I've been doing, and also take this as an opportunity to introduce newcomers to software you can love. So this is the softwareyoucanlove.ca website for this event in Vancouver. sycl.it for the event in Milan, who knows, in the future there might be some other location, and maybe we'll have its own website, depends on who decides to run it. But I made softwareyoucan.love as the official website, not tied to any specific event, where you can find links to Software You Can Love events, and where I also put an explanation on what Software You Can Love is, so that people can, well, have an idea without having to read random blog posts filled with like rants about and ramblings about things that aren't, that are maybe a little bit too specific with Zig. And in fact, I want to run you through the text that I wrote to introduce people to Software You Can Love. So I'm gonna go through some of it. For some of us, creating software is an intimate act. We care deeply about the experience that results from our work, just like a painter or a musician takes pride in their art. In the second section, I explain that Software You Can Love is a conference. I give some links to interesting talks. I'm going to play this section probably with talks from this new event. Then the third part says, unfortunately, a lot of software out there is not software you can love. Many of us are forced to write user-hostile software at work, and elegant solutions are often discarded in the pursuit of extravagant business models. At Software You Can Love, we also want to learn how to protect ourselves from dark patterns, both as software engineers as users. And then it ends with a call to action, like, do join us. OK, so from this section, I want to tell you a little bit more about two sentences in particular. I consider these two sentences the Software You Can Love manifesto. I didn't go for a traditional, explicit manifesto. It's hidden in a just normal explanation. For some of us, creating software is an intimate act. This is who we are. Unfortunately, a lot of software out there is not Software You Can Love. This is what we fight against. One thing that I like about this explanation is that it doesn't define, we don't define ourselves just as a function of what we are against. Today, we think of programming as an intimate act, and we continue to do so even the day where user-hostile software doesn't exist anymore, which would be nice. Personally, I think it's important to really avoid defining yourself as just against something else. Now, also, I do acknowledge that this is very succinct. There's a lot that is being left unsaid here. But this is by design. So in my mind, I don't think I can write, I don't think I can explain the problems that we do have in tech in like just a few words. And on the other hand, I think that people have to experience it firsthand. And once they do, I don't think they're going to need any more words than this. Second reason why I think succinctness is important is because this keeps the marketers away. So I work in marketing, and people in marketing are in the business of repurposing ideas to their ends. That's the kind of thing that gets you funny stuff, like Microsoft loves Linux with an open source bouquet in the background. And it's weird, it's funny. I think they actually kind of mean it nowadays, outside of the scope of this presentation, but it's, I don't know, it's weird seeing a tux with the weirdest tattoo you could get. But here's how it starts. First, they put their logo next to your idea. Then they kind of embrace and champion it. I took this photo at reInvent. This is a AWS metal pin that says database freedom on it. And I was working at Redis Labs, and I did the Redis bouquet this time in that photo. Anyway, I'm kind of proud of it. Some of you also remember what I wrote next to it on my blog post. Anyway, so this is how it continues. And then, if they execute well, marketing becomes part of the business strategy. It can help give strength and structure to business operations, just like you go from database freedom to, AWS forking Elasticsearch. Now, they didn't just fork Elasticsearch for money reasons. Of course not. They stepped up for a truly open source Elasticsearch. Yeah. So, long story short, that's the kind of stuff that I don't want, that I would like to avoid. And not telling too much to marketers helps making sure that they never get to a point where they can wield our ideas against us. That's kind of my thinking. OK, so unfortunately, a lot of software out there is not software you can love. Let me give you just one example of this. It's going to be a short rant, I promise, and then we can move on. So one thing that has really been ruining my life lately is software that doesn't take no for an answer. It's this kind of thing. It's like, do you want to turn on notifications? Either yes or not now. There is no just no. And this is Twitter. I hate it. This is one variation of 3 that I've seen. This one shows up as a pop-up. There's another one that masquerades as a notification. So you open the Twitter app, and there's like a one notification in the tab. And then you click on it, and it says, no, you don't have notifications, but you could enable notifications. And again, the only thing that you can press there is see less often. Fucking Twitter. But it's not just Twitter, right? Like you say, oh man, Twitter is garbage. OK, Windows. It's like an MMO. New unlock. Like, oh, you leveled up. Now you can get Windows 11. No, I don't want Windows 11, but the 2 main options are get it or schedule it. Raise your hand if you had to fight this update screen. Yeah, OK, a few. It's insane. It's absolutely insane. You can still, thankfully, keep Windows 10. It's down there, next to the fine print. Yeah, they hid it there. OK, now you say, well, Loris, it's easy. OK, you choose a social network and goddamn Windows as the 2 examples. That's easy. OK, you're right. Take a look at this. Mozilla NordVPN is a powerful, easy-to-use virtual private network. Get Mozilla VPN or not now. So open source and free software is starting to doing this as well. It's everywhere. It's everywhere. Software you can love was also an expression that I made up because I think that people tend to imbue the idea of open source with like this concept of collaboration and doing things for the end user. Not anymore. Not even in Firefox. And that brings me to the only winning move. So you want to make software you can love. Where do you start? Well, I think there is one basic move that I think everybody should consider doing. I think it's, saying that it's the only winning move might be a slight overstatement, but it is very important in my opinion, and that's what I want to explain. It's not a super complex concept, but it is a little bit, it's obvious, but also counterintuitive at the same time. That's why it's like a bit of a weird mix. Also, I think that there might be people here who are at a point in their life where you already understand this very well. That is fine. I'm sorry, I'm not going to bring you any mind-blowing realization. But with these talks, I want to make sure that we all have like a common baseline shared understanding so that we can all agree on the basics. And also, I think it's nice to prioritize a little bit younger people who are now navigating a very complex landscape when it comes to finding jobs and stuff. So this is an idea that I've seen explained in game theory books using tennis as an example. Okay? Here's how it goes. When you play tennis, you have your dominant arm. And let's simplify everything a little bit, but let's imagine that when you hit the ball with your dominant arm, 80% of the time you score a point. Like you're really good, really, bam, like anime style. Your non-dominant arm, though, it's just 30%, so it's much, much weaker in comparison. Now, you could train more your dominant arm and bump it up to 90%. But the question is at this point, how many more games are you going to win by bumping up your dominant arm to 90%? And the answer that the game theory book that I read, at least as I understood it, was that you shouldn't expect this to really make any difference, much difference or any at all, because your opponents, as soon as you get past very immature opponents, they will start challenging you on your weak arm. They will recognize that that arm is dangerous, and they will shift what they challenge you on. So you will not be able to have that 90% power come to fruition in the end. So Training your weak arm makes your dominant arm more effective, because the moment your weak arm becomes more effective, your opponent will stop forcing you to use it as much. It's obvious, right? But it's also slightly counterintuitive, because not training your dominant arm is what makes it more effective. That's the slightly confusing part. I'm not sure how this, August, did you get this? Does that make sense? Yes? You don't sound convinced. Okay, new example. Dota 2. Okay. Dota 2. So, Dota is not mobile, Jesus Christ, multiplayer online battle arena. I think it's a MOBA game. You have like about 100 heroes. Each one has very unique abilities. Each is played in a radically different way than the others. They tend to have, they're all very interesting. They tend to have usually 2, 3, 4 active skills that you can use. Except one dude, this guy, the Invoker. The Invoker is interesting because he has 14 active abilities, 1/4. That's a lot. He is like the galaxy brain hero, basically. And people spend a lot of time training their Invoker because you have to transition. I'm not going to go into the details of how the Invoker, the mechanics work, but like you have to learn how to transition from and chain your spells, etc. And there's a lot of things that you can learn. There's a lot of depth there. So people spend a lot of time training their Invoker playstyle. Here you can see like the Invoker throwing a bunch of skills. It doesn't matter if you can't really fully tell what's going on. Like here's the funny part, the meteorite. People call it the meatball. Anyway, so you can spend a lot of time training your Invoker, but here's the obvious but counterintuitive thing. Playing other heroes makes you a better Invoker. It's obvious, right? Because playing other heroes teaches you what others can do to you and what they are weak against. So becoming a better Invoker involves playing any hero but the Invoker at some point. Matt, did this one work for you? Yeah?
Yeah, that works.
You don't sound convinced. Okay. Age of Empires 4, I have never really played Age of Empires, but I know that in Age of Empires you have a ton of units, but I'm going to focus on 3 units. You have archers, you have spearmen, and you have horsemen. Archers are weak against horsemen because horsemen can rush them, but horsemen are weak against spearmen. So if you have a ton of archers, getting a spearman makes your archers more effective, because that way the opponent cannot rush them with a horse, right? Does that make sense? Has this ever happened in a game? Okay, so yeah. Spearmen make your archers more effective, or I don't know, something. I haven't played Age of Empires. Okay, enough with the examples. Let's bring it back to reality. Training skills other than programming will make you more effective at creating software. This is obvious, but it's maybe slightly counterintuitive because programming is the main thing that you need to know to create software, but at the same time, it's not all there is to it. There's a lot more. And in fact, programming skill is fundamental. That is for sure. For me personally, the Ziggy adventure has been a great source of self-reflection and learning when it comes to programming. And I was at the Berlin meetup a while ago, and I really recommend it to people to get into systems, learn a little bit of systems programming, stop just using frameworks with a high-level language. There's really a lot. You hit diminishing returns real fast there. But that's not all, right? Especially like if you're at a conference like this one, I would say that you're like on a good path. You already kind of know how to get better, and you might very well be, maybe not today, but you're en route to get to the 80% effectiveness, and doubling down into more programming might get you to 90%. But if you're like unhappy with your workplace, going up from 80 to 90 is not really gonna land you a better job, right? Sometimes you're like just working at a workplace where, I used to work for a consultancy company. We didn't make software you can love. And there's nothing you can do there. Sometimes it's a matter of finding a better job. Some other times is something else. The problem is that, let me go to the next slide. Yeah, okay. So the problem is that, especially if you're unhappy with your job, the problem is that you need to gain decisional power. You need to get to a position where you can make design decisions over the software. And if you're just a simple software developer, you might be in a situation, you will probably be in a situation where you don't have the power. It's like in Star Trek where the engineers, they are the ones that make the ship go forward. But they don't decide where the ship goes. That's what the captain does. Not everybody has to do it, of course, but my point is that if today you want to improve your situation, it might be that you can't afford to just be a random software developer. You might have to do something more. It would be nice if you could just be a software developer and live a happy life, but that's how things are. And so, for example, it would be nice if somebody who understood that not now is a bad idea took the job that the guy who decided to put there the button in Mozilla has. Like, we should really consider working towards the goal of getting ourselves into positions where we can have an influence over this type of projects. Like, seriously, I'm so mad at the idea that Mozilla is adding a not now button, and I think some people, we should have a negative reaction against this that goes past complaining on a random talk. Anyway. Here's another point. So on one end, I do think there is a adversarial aspect to what I just mentioned, meaning like in the tennis example, the opponent is actively playing against your weak arm. You could argue that when it comes to programming is not really adversarial. But while programming itself is not adversarial, creating software is adversarial. There's only so many leadership positions, and you're competing with other people to get to those. When you make an open source project, there will be other competing open source projects, and if you think that your thing is really good, you are in a sense competing against other packages, and et cetera, et cetera. So there is a adversarial component to it. But even if you take that away, I really think that it's important to learn other things past programming, because programming is a solution to practical problems. And you need experience. You really gain a lot of design, good taste. I don't know how to phrase this, but you really become more effective at creating software if you learn other things that aren't just programming. Again, this might, on one end is obvious. On the other hand, it might be a little bit, seem a little bit confusing. But think about it this way. So this is like a Rube Goldberg machine, right? Those things that make no sense, right? We write this kind of software. Like the moment you step outside of your comfort zone, your software solution will be, to some degree, like this, until you iterate on it a little bit and make it better. We made a simple website for software you can love, and there were some features that I added to my implementation that were, in hindsight, kind of useless. They were a little bit Rube Goldberg-y machine, yeah. And so learning other things that aren't just software really, really makes you a better software engineer for real. And there's also another problem, because I think that the adversarial component also bleeds into this. This is Rui. Rui wrote a linker, a very good linker, and he started a business saying, well, the Linux version of the linker is free for everybody, but if you want the Mac version, you gotta pay. And some people, I guess, paid for that, some companies. But Apple at the last WWDC thing announced that they wrote a much better linker. And Rui tweeted this. Oh, did Apple just destroy my business? Now, this is not a dig at Rui, but my point is that that space is extremely competitive. So if all you know, if you don't know anything about the world outside, if the only type of software that the only domain that you know is software itself, and the only thing that you feel proficient at is writing software for writing more software, you're getting yourself in an extremely competitive environment. So in practice, your chances of actually pulling off being able to do software you can love are very slim. While at the same time, there's like a huge universe of domains out there that sorely need better software where you could well, maybe not very easily, but more easily be able to find a tiny space where you can happily improve someone's life and get something in return yourself. So this is real. Like, there's this question that people keep asking: why is there so much hype around Zig? And they can't wrap their head around this, but it's really, it's a very strong dominant arm. I think we have like a 300% dominant arm, but we're not the only software project that has good engineering behind it. So what's interesting about Zig from that perspective? I'll tell you the secret, which is in front of everybody. Like, it's in plain sight, it's just that they can't see it. It's stuff like this. You know what? Let me see how much time. Let me see how much time I have, because I kind of want to read this. Yeah, I think I definitely have time. So this is really nice. I'm going to read it and then analyze it a little bit. This is, for context, this is an answer that Andrew wrote a while ago, a couple of years ago, to somebody who was interested in maybe contributing to Zig for hot code reloading, for adding hot code reloading support to Zig. And he was saying that I don't remember if he actually had started working on his own programming language / framework system for implementing hot code reloading, or if he was just considering it. But this was the exchange. So Andrew replied, with your own language and your own project, your pace of development would be faster, and you would have more control over stuff. So a downside of contributing to Zig would be that you have to give up that control. But if the Zig vision and philosophies vibe with you, and you become a regular, trusted contributor, you can get to the point in Zig where you have some autonomy and decision-making power as far as how something is implemented or designed. However, to be clear, this project governance is BDFL style. So that's what you would be getting yourself into. The upside of all of that, though, is that we're a friendly bunch, and you would have a thriving community of contributors to breathe life into the stuff you work on. Again, whatever you choose, nice to meet you, welcome, and let's collaborate on this problem. The ability to collaboration with other people is not necessarily always being all super warm and super friendly. It's also about boundaries. It's also about pointing out what it is that you care about, what it is that you can that you're willing to give up something, and things that you are not willing to give up. And this is not just Andrew. This is something that happens very often in the community. We're not perfect at it, but that makes a huge difference when it comes to the community ability to come together and make things. So this is one reason why there's so much hype around Zig. Another interesting reason, so I chose only 2 examples. I could probably have an entire event, like 2 full days of just examples of interesting things that I've seen people do. Today I chose Jim Price. Oh, where's Jim? Oh, hey, Jim. So Jim wrote this blog post titled Zig and the Zigsaw, where he basically explains how he wrote a Zig program to solve a puzzle programmatically. So this is not a particularly explosive piece of marketing about Zig. It's just an interesting tidbit, like an experience that he had. But what I really like about this blog post is that it's clear that Jim has, he brings to the table more than just programming. Like this tiny story, you can clearly see that he has an appreciation for visual storytelling that normal developers don't have. I might be reading too much into it. I don't know. So you know what? I'll tell you. Since I started writing blog posts for a living, I feel like I can tell a little bit more what is the tiny differences between different blog posts written by different people and stuff like that. And I feel like this is like I picked up on something very interesting here. So what is my point? Sorry, my point is that Jim and a lot of other people in the community come in and bring an experience that isn't just pure programming. They also bring something else. And that really weaves into the type of thing that we do and how interesting are the things that come out of the Z community. OK. So I'm finally ready to tell you what the only winning move is. I know that in Wargames, the movie ends like this, right? The only winning move is not to play. But this might be the only winning move when you're playing global thermonuclear war. We're not playing that. We're just making software. Some of us maybe are playing the open source game. Some are not. But yeah, we're not dealing with nukes. And more in general, if you think about it, how did the computer come to this conclusion? The computer came to this conclusion because before that, it played a ton of other games that informed his decision-making on a specific game, right? And that's kind of the idea. Before the computer could come to this conclusion, it had to play a ton of games. And that's, in my opinion, the only winning move. You need to play all games. Again, all might be an overstatement, but you can't just focus on programming. You are really gonna, at some point, hit diminishing returns, and your invoker is not going to be as good as somebody else's invoker, or something like this. So again, it's a very simple idea, but if you never consider this, you should really think about it a little bit more. It really makes a difference in the quality of the work that you put out. This is a sequel to my previous talk from the first Software You Can Love. This story will continue, not as Software You Can Love, but it will continue at Handmade Seattle with my next talk, which is going to be Disassembling Imposter Syndrome. If you have experienced this kind of stuff, like if you feel like you feel sometimes like an imposter, or hopefully you're going to be interested. But I promise you it's going to be interesting also if you are never, ever experienced anything like that. Spoilers, or rather, anti-spoilers, I'm not going to try to argue that it's imposter syndrome even when you're just a little bit unsure about your stuff. Everybody is, that's not imposter syndrome. It's going to be something more interesting than that. And with this, that's it.
All right, any questions for Loris?
I just only got involved in Zig probably like 4 months ago because I found it somehow. I don't know how, probably read it. But how have you kept it from being really toxic of a community? Because every time I see a Rust post, just to badmouth them, it's like everyone's arguing and everyone hates each other. But like everyone here at Zig and all the videos I've watched have been so like friendly and nice.
Yeah, thank you. I think that the main answer is I have no idea. I generally do not think. I tried to think about this real hard, and I don't think I know what the precise answer is. What I can tell you is that knowing how to negotiate with people, like interactions can go wrong, even if neither party is necessarily bad or has evil intentions. Sometimes, actually, almost every time, people come in with the best of intentions, and then things go wrong. And things can go wrong simply because of a lack of skill. Like, as August would say, it's a skill issue. But it's real. It's true. It's true. You aren't born exactly knowing how to negotiate with other people, to negotiate with social groups, to understand what it is, behavior that is good for you and everybody, and behavior that is not as good. So I think that in our case, what we were lucky is that when the project started, there was a lot of competence around these topics. Just like there is a lot of competence about strict programming and software engineering, and that helped like crystallize a community around this core. I feel like that a lot of the drama, I also wrote this on Twitter, but I feel like a lot of the drama related to the Rust community is tied to the fact that the people involved got to a point where they feel like they cannot assume good faith from the other party when something goes wrong. Stuff goes wrong also in the Z community, but at least the cases that I've been involved with, it usually an apology, usually people are not feeling in a position where they can't give an apology. I feel like I've seen apologies being given, like I would say, in an earnest way. And on the other side, maybe the other side didn't even need an apology because, again, the interaction was one that, where at the end, people still assumed good faith from the other party. It doesn't happen every time, but I think that's something very important that we need to make sure we don't lose. Because once you lose that, then collaborating becomes much, much, much harder. Yeah.
All right, who's next?
Thank you for the talk. I can really relate a lot. I have a background in industrial engineering instead of software engineering, so it's kind of interesting to hear your thoughts. My question was more around how do you think you can make software you can love sustainable as a business? Of course, those marketing practices that you mentioned are bad and dark patterns, but they have been developed because somehow make the business more sustainable in a way or make more money. I don't know. How do you think can be sustainable?
So making software you can love more sustainable. Okay, I'm going to still preface everything with I don't really know 100%. But what I do know is that when I worked in big tech, I've seen people do some of the things that they do, like spamming email addresses and generally being, stealing private data, stuff of this kind. I've seen it mostly as the result of them just not knowing how to run a business. Because to be blunt, what I've seen is that company starts with some idea on how to have a business model, then they get venture capital money, then they are off to the races, but they can't rise just as quick. And so at some point, you start having pressure from the top, where, like the leadership of the company, where they start like squeezing, they say, well, we are racing to an IPO or something like this, so we really need to push to, it's one last push. And that's the moment where, for example, marketing takes the email address database of developers who have subscribed to the technical mailing list and start sending them the non-technical emails, and that is not good. But they are desperate at that point, so they're willing to burn the future in exchange for one more conversion, one more person down the marketing pipeline today. So ultimately, it's a move of desperation. And when things get desperate, it's bad, right? You could say the same with open source projects. There are open source projects where the people involved, I can sympathize with them because they maybe just wanted to get down coding. They didn't want to think about like paperwork, incorporating, stuff like that. That's annoying. But years later, you discover that projects like GIMP, when I found this out, it was mind-blowing. The GIMP, okay, raise of hand, who here has used the GIMP? Who here likes the UI of the GIMP? Okay, you have no idea how insane, how unimaginable it is that GIMP has that kind of UI, and I mean that in a good sense, that quality of UI, considering, you might not like it, but consider the fact that for some reason, until August 2018, I think, the developers working on the GIMP were not getting paid for their work at all. They were using the GNOME Foundation to get donations, but they could not use that money to pay for developer work. They could only use that money. This is written on their own blog, right? So I have sources if you want. They could only use that money to buy laptops and to fund events. I think in August 2018, they pushed out a blog post saying, well, since we are in this state, we are officially endorsing the Patreons of this core contributor and this other core contributor, so go donate to them. This is as official as it can get. These people never had a cent for their work until 2018. So it's insane to me. So long story short, you need to get good at business. It's a skill issue. Like, get good at business. Okay, it's like Counter-Strike, right? Just click heads. It's easy. But seriously, it's just like, how do you make a good program? you write it correctly, right? You make good engineering choices. Okay, I know it's silly, but the point is that creating software means that you need to understand also these problems. You need to negotiate with other people, you need to collaborate, you need to compete against other people. The guy who made it not now, really, we should take his job. Okay, this is me patting myself on the back, but I think Andrew did something very interesting when the first person he hired for the Z Software Foundation was not somebody hired to work on the compiler. So, yeah, that's my answer.
Thank you.
All right, who's next?
Appreciate the talk, for sure. Can't wait for the sequel. Do you have practical suggestions for maybe the programmers here of which other muscles outside of just programming they could start, training right away? So I think the previous person asking that question mentioned starting a business, for example, and then you mentioned, yeah, we could build up some business acumen of some kind, but then what steps would you take to start building up that business acumen? And then what other things would you suggest? Maybe like, should we get into art? Or should we get into being like more social? Should we volunteer for conferences? Like, should register for as many conferences as possible, become volunteers, learn how to be social? Like, give us a list of things we could maybe start doing.
Yeah. I have something somewhat spicy in mind. I don't know if I should drop it like this. Okay, I'll start with the basic stuff. Again, I have no idea. I think it's really hard, and it really depends on what you're into. Like, depending on which domains, which type of things you want to do, it's very different. I would say recommendation number one: don't make your thing open source. Actually, no. Before that, program for something that isn't software engineers. Don't sell software tooling. You can, it's possible. It's just so hard and so competitive. You will have a much easier time selling software to somebody else. There's many more problems out there that need software solutions that are gonna be trivial for you to employ, and they will make somebody else very happy. So stay away from software itself. Point number two, don't start with open source, do closed source. Open source is nice. I generally speaking, like open source. I like people who do open source software. I don't really like the open source initiative, if you haven't picked up on that. Yeah, don't start with open source. And because open source makes your business model harder. Open source is not a business model. If anything, it's something that you're giving stuff out for free, right? So that's already not good if you want to make money. And then you get yourself into this weird, like for us, for software engineers, open source is like our wrestling, right? Like the AWS coming up with the chair on Elastic's back, bam, right? People love this, but now you're playing the game, and it's tough, man. It's real tough because AWS is gonna come in and say, "Oh, that's yours? No, that's mine now. Thank you very much," and you're not gonna be able to stop them. So about open source. Point number three. I think that as part of all these issues like these problems with how software is designed and how money flows, we are being sold the idea of working for big tech. When I was younger, I remember like my aunts and parents say, "Oh, you're so smart, you're gonna work at Google." Never happened, thank God. Yeah, we are being sold this idea. So people search validation in being like, "Oh, I'm a Googler." That's cool. I mean, good for you. But stop searching validation. Stop giving power to these hierarchies. They are not as good as they claim to be. Same applies with venture capital. Like starting a startup and getting venture capital, it's great, but you shouldn't do it because you're searching for validation by them. I know I did, so I'm not going to annoy, I'm not going to point at anybody. I'm not going to ask you to raise your hands, but I did apply once to Y Combinator, and in a sense, that was me searching for somebody to tell me, yeah, you're actually good as you think you are. You shouldn't. Also because at the end of the day, if you're going down the path, you need to have a business model, in my opinion, that makes sense that way. Otherwise, you're going to get yourself into the desperate situation that I described earlier. So walking your own path for real is a thing that you should consider. Don't do it completely alone. I don't know if this community is going to be the best community for having some recognition, having somebody to tell you, like having a second opinion that isn't necessarily interested in grabbing a slice of your pie. But I think it's real. And okay, just one last example that I think is relevant, and then I'm going to stop rambling. But we are also, it's not just working for big tech, right? But it's also working in friendly places where rent is high. And when rent is super high, you have to keep working a high-paying job, right? How are you going to pay rent otherwise? And so you're locked. This is big privilege, I guess, but you're forced to work a high-paying job, which is insane. And so maybe moving somewhere where you don't have to do this will give you a chance to say, you know what? I'm not working for big tech. I'm not getting venture capital money. I'm just going to do a slow business. And that's probably what has the highest chances of allowing you to do software you can love. That's my opinion.
Okay, I'm gonna allow one more question, and then I'm cutting Laura's off.
This will be a little shallower than the last few questions, and maybe not much of a question at all, but because I love the movie Wargames so much, I had to comment on your last slide. Yeah. You mentioned that Joshua, the artificial intelligence that plays video games, came to an unintuitive conclusion by having a wider variety of experiences and skills. I had a sort of different take on it, though. At the end of the movie, this artificial intelligence plays global thermonuclear war 500 times in a row, and then it always ends in apocalypse. And so its conclusion is there is, the only winning move is not to play. And I don't know, maybe there is a sort of different cautionary tale that could be a parable for I don't know, open source or open core as a business model, beating your head against the wall until you just throw your hands up in the air and get sick of it and give up and write a really angry blog post about how this can never work.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's a reasonable reading. People do try to do things with open source, and sometimes, yeah, they hit their head against the wall. And but I feel like this is the result of not wanting, it's them picking thermonuclear war over and over, right? They could, I don't know, press escape or restart the connection, pick a different game. But I think, let me put it this way. Your ability to select what you should be doing is also influenced by your skills and the variety of your experiences. So at least you should, consider learning more things, just so you have a chance to better pick your poison, I guess. If we want to really be specific about the movie, though, I think that the movie was mostly about a type of I think for me, it's about another thing that relates to big tech, in my opinion. What I described with marketing willing to sacrifice the future in exchange for one more lead today, because that's, I think, the main theme of the movie, right? Falcon gave up on the future because of the death of his child, and while the army was dead set on winning the battle today, even if that means complete mutual annihilation in the future. And that's the key type of reasoning that was missing also to Joshua, right? That's why tic-tac-toe, of all games, tic-tac-toe ended up being the key missing piece. And if you will, you can't get more software you can love than that, right? The point of software you can love is also to not do that, not sacrifice long-term happiness in exchange for one more email address today, or eventually tiring people to death with the goddamn not now button. That's it.
That's great, thank you.
Awesome, thank you, Loris.